Hello everybody. I picked up this camera recently and had to learn a bit about it before I purchased it because there are three versions. So I thought I'd do a video kind of talking about this camera and telling you the differences between the three versions in case you want to get one. So this is version 2. It's called the Nikon L35AF2 and there's an AD version as well, which stands for auto date. So the three versions were, there was version 1 which came out in 1983 and it looks almost exactly the same as this one, but it doesn't have this kind of lens, these lens doors that protect the element. Instead, what you got, which you don't get with version 2, is you get a screw thread so that you can screw on filters or a yellow lens filter for black and white or a lens hood. But you don't get that unfortunately in version 2, but you do get these opening and closing doors that protect the front element. All three versions are a 35mm prime lens, 2.8 fast for a compact camera, point and shoot of its day. And they are becoming very collectible because it's kind of known that these 35mm 2.8 lenses are very, very sharp, got good contrast, don't suffer from lens flare. So at the time, it's kind of a bit of a plastic point and shoot, although well regarded, and was called the Pikachi, I think that's how you pronounce it, which stands for, that was kind of its nickname, the Pikachi, which was top quality or top notch, which is kind of its nickname. And version 1 of this camera has really started to rocket in price, although version 2 and 3 aren't far behind. Seen these go for sort of £80 to £100 in some cases. So it's it'll shoot, the lens will shoot from sort of 0.8 meters to infinity on the first version and the second version. It's the first version of this camera, the lens was 5 elements in 4 groups and it had a 46mm filter thread. And the first version also had a lever where you could do a +2 exposure compensations if you're shooting a photo of somebody and they're backlit with the sun behind them or a light behind them, and you want to make sure that it exposes for them. You could dial in a couple of extra stops of exposure, which that doesn't seem to be here on the second version. They took that away, as well as the filter thread. In the first version as well, there were actually 2 kind of iterations. On the lens, you can set the ISO manually, and whereas on the second and third, on the second version, it's DX coded. So you just put the film in, and it works out by reading the film what the ISO should be. But on the first version, you set it manually. Some people prefer that, and I think that's part of the reason. That and the filter thread are part of the reason the first version is going for a little bit more money. But there are 2 iterations of the first version where you could set it from, I think it's 25 or 50 to 400, and then they increased it so you could set it from say 50 to 1000 ISO. So the 1000 ISO ones are going for a little bit more, because people want to shoot slightly faster film. They wouldn't be able to do that if the film speed was greater than 400 on that first iteration of the first version, or if you wanted to push and pull your film above 400 ISO. Again, you'd struggle to do that on the first iteration of the first version. But as I say, second iteration, it went up to 1000. And this second version of the camera gets a bit confusing, but this is the L35AF2. This is DX coded, so you can't do that, but it has a range from 50 to 1600 ISO. Personally, I don't really miss not being able to manually set the ISO. DX coding is absolutely fine. I'm not bulk loading film that doesn't have the black squares on the film that tell the camera and enable it to DX code. So most film all film I'd put in this camera would be able to read the DX code off it. So in the third version, they actually brought back the filter thread because that was kind of missed in the second version. But what's sort of quite interesting is in the first 2 versions, they take AA batteries. which is great because you can buy them anyway. You take this on holiday, your batteries run out, you can just go and get some more AA's. But the third version, although it's got the filter thread and it's a bit newer, so it'd be quite nice to get one, probably last a bit longer. The first version was in 1983, second version was 85, and then the third version was 87. But although I quite like the third version of this camera, and it'd be nice to get one with a filter thread, the third camera doesn't take normal batteries. It takes a 6-volt CRP2 lithium batteries, which are, I know from experience because I've had to buy those for other point and shoot cameras. They're quite expensive, so it's a shame they didn't stick with AA's for all three versions of the L35 camera. So that's the main thing. The 1980 kind of 3, the first version, suffered with issues with the shutter button breaking. I think there's a weak point there, and that can break. And also the battery door as well. I've seen that break in ones that have been sold. I don't think it's too much better in the second version. You just kind of pull it back with a nail, and then it's just on this sort of piece of sort of hinge of thin plastic, so it doesn't fill you with confidence, and you kind of pull it back and then it goes in. But that's just things to watch for, really, are the shutter button and the door for the batteries. I've got film in this one, so I won't open the back of it, but you pull that down and then you could open the door and put your film in, and you just sort of pull it across, and enough, you don't have to feed it into the spool or anything. It just sort of auto loads it and auto rewinds, and it auto advances to the next shot as well. So it's a sort of fully automatic camera, this one. And as I say, in the second version you can't even set the ISO, so it's really fully automatic. There's a timer there, 10-second timer there. Goes like that, and you open the lens. One thing I did get with this, it doesn't have the filter threads, so I had a quick look online, and I didn't, only cost about £5, and I picked up this Nikon filter for the L35AF2, and in the box was one of these, which I actually dropped today getting out of the box, and I've slightly chipped the glass when this element fell out, because it's not glued in, so it sort of fell like that, and then the glass pinged on the floor. So that's something to be a bit careful of, but actually, I mean, that's fine. It's only very slight edge that got chipped. But what you do is, with the doors closed, you hook that over, and that clicks on, and that just protects the front of the camera. So if you were in sandy conditions and taking photos and you want sand blowing into the camera with those doors open, that protects it. I don't know if you can get versions of this L37 with a yellow filter, but that would be good if you could get that. So when you're shooting black and white, it'll kind of make the skies a bit more dark and increase the contrast. But I leave this on most of the time to protect that front element when I'm out and about and using the camera. The flash here will pop up automatically if it needs it, and that's about it, really. As I say, because there's three versions, from 83 and then 85 and then 87, and there's two versions of the first one that came out in 83, I thought I'd do this little video about it. What we'll do is compare it in size to another popular camera, point and shoot, so the Olympus Muju one. So you can see it's a lot smaller, the Olympus, and that would fit in your pocket, whereas the Nikon is a bit of a brick. You'd have to have a bit of a big coat pocket, really, to put that in, compared to the small Olympus. So that's the kind of difference in size. But I mean, it's a simple, sort of straightforward camera, the Nikon. It's good fun to take out and about. The main reason people are buying these is because the lens is so good on all three versions. They did change the lens construction it went from 5 elements in 4 groups to 4 elements in 3 groups in the kind of later versions. It's a shame that the third version takes these expensive batteries. I think I'll try and pick up the first version, but with the ISO that goes to 1000 if I can at some point. But because the prices on these have gone up, and you can get lucky, I didn't pay very much for this, but you have to really follow it on eBay and watch and wait until one comes up and try and buy it quickly if you spot one. But alternatives to this camera that you can get that are still you're able to have to be had quite cheap are the Nikon L35AF. So it's a very similar looking camera, really. It's not that different. You set your ISO on the front here, a little switch between 100, 400 and 1000. So there isn't 200, which is a bit annoying. I'd have liked that. And you pop that and the flash goes up. And it's got a little door switch here. You go like that. And again, so that protects the front element, which is quite nice. But the reason these aren't, you can pick these up quite cheap, sort of £10 or so, maybe even a bit less, in really good condition, is that the lens is a 35 f3.5, so it's not as fast as the 2.8 that you get in the L35s. The L135s have that slightly slower lens, but it is also a very sharp lens, and I've heard people that have used these for years, back in the kind of 80s and 90s, that it gives really sharp results. You just kind of, if it's a holiday camera and you're going there, it's bright and sunny because you're going on holiday, then do you always need 2.8? You know, 3.5 is probably perfectly fine. It takes really sharp photos at 3.5, so it's a good camera to get, and these probably will go up in price as popularity kind of grows and people get priced out of buying these. These will probably go up a bit. This also takes AA's, so is straightforward to buy batteries for. And if I open the back, just to show you, because they share the same kind of on the inside. If I could open the back of this, I've got a film in, but it's very similar. I pop the film in there, pull it round to a certain point to the coloured tab, close the lid, and it'll advance the film through, and then each time you take the shot, it just automatically advances to the next shot. Another alternative, because these are getting quite popular, is the underwater or fully weatherproof, I think it's to 10 meters, Nikon Action Touch. And this has the 2.8 35mm lens, and from what I've read, this is essentially just as sharp as this camera. This is just built like a tank, absolutely waterproof. I think it's 10 meters or something. This is waterproof, sturdier version of this camera. But these are starting to go up in price a bit as well. Again, I think anything that's got a prime lens that's quite quick and sharp, good contrast and not much flare in a point and shoot is becoming quite desirable, because what kind of happened after these cameras came out is Nikon, as the kind of years went on, they started to do zoom lenses and didn't do primes anymore in their point and shoots. And the zoom lenses just aren't going to be as good as a sharp, fast prime. So although I own some point and shoot Nikon cameras and Olympus cameras with zoom lenses, you know, they're not going to be as popular and they're not as sharp as these lovely 35mm 2.8 prime lenses. I think that was kind of it, really. Thank you very much. If you're enjoying these videos, like and share, and I'll make more. Thank you very much.